Hi guys, this is our notes on inverse functions. So to start off, we have to start with the definition, and inverse means opposite, right? Just like we have inverse functions, so like plus and minus are inverses of each other, or multiply and divide are, or even something like taking something to a square and square rooting it. Those are inverse operations, they're opposites. So we're going to take a look at two expressions or functions here. So we have the f of x function, which is here, and then we have its inverse. And the way that we write the inverse is f negative 1 of x, which is kind of weird. We pronounce it as the inverse function. So what we're going to start with is think about what would happen if they gave us x as a number. So let's say x is the number 2, right? So if I was going to put in the rest of the function, 2 to the third plus 1, the first thing that I would do if I was using this is I would cube it, right? I'd do 2 cubed. So first thing I would do is cube it. From there, I would take whatever I got and I would multiply by 2. So I'm going to write multiply by 2, and then whatever I got from there, I would add the 1. So that's my last step, is to add 1. So those are my 3 major steps if they gave me a number for x. So the same thing would be true if they gave me a number for x here. So let's just say they gave me the number 2. We'll use 2 again. So let's say they said that x was 2. So I'd say 2 minus 1 over 2, and it's in that cube root. So the first thing that I would do to solve this is I would do 2 minus 1. So I would do minus 1. And then I would take whatever I got there, and I would divide by 2. So step 2 would be divide by 2. And then my third step would be to cube root it. Right, so whatever I got, I would take the cube root. So that'd be cube root. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at the steps, and I'm going to see if they are opposites of each other. So step 1 in this one was cube it, and step 3 at the bottom was cube root. And those are opposites of each other. So I could say that those go together. Right, so I'm looking at the first and the last. And then I'm going to go down to step 2 was multiply by 2. And if I'm going to go up on this side, dividing by 2. And those are opposites of each other. They're dividing and multiplying, and by the same number. And then the last step on this one, step 3, should be opposite of step 1. Right? So adding 1 and minusing 1. Those are opposites of each other, inverses. So these are inverses because they have the opposite steps, right? So one does it in one order, and then the other one does the backwards things in a backwards order, okay? So really, like, you're probably asking, like, what does this even do? Why do I even use it? So what we're going to do is we're going to see what happens. We're going to plug the 3 into f. So this is like fog, but with or like f of g of x, like this, right? But this is where we're going to take the 3 and put it in the f, and then whatever we get, we're going to put into f of negative 1. So we'll put 3 into f here. So the f equation is 2x to the third plus 1. We're changing out the x's and turning them into 3's. So we have 2, 3 to the power of 3, plus 1. That's going to be, we're going to do our cube first. So 3 times 3 times 3, which would be 27, times 2, plus 1. This would be 54, plus 1. That makes 55 altogether. So that's f of 3. And then remember that we have the second step, which is to take that 55 and put it back into f of negative 1. So f of negative 1, or f negative 1 of x, is the cube root of x minus 1 divided by 2. So in this case, we're going to take our 55 We're going to put that 55 in for x. So we would have 55 minus 1 over 2 and the cube root of that. So 55 minus 1 would be 54 divided by 2. 54 divided by 2 is 27. Still have that cube root. The cube root of 27, you can use your calculator or know that 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So this would be 3. So we can see that if we take the inverse of something, right? So if we get something from our original function, right, and we put a number in, like the number 3, and then we put that number into our opposite function, our inverse function, then we get the same number. Right? So that's kind of what inverses are about. They're opposites. They undo each other. So that's how we know that they're inverses. So let's deal with some different problems here. It says, so are these functions inverses? So the way I'm going to tell is I'm going to say, okay, step 1, what would I do to this x? Well, first, if I had that x, I would square it. So I'm going to square it. And then once I had x squared, I'm going to multiply by 2. Multiply by, oh, not 2, sorry, 3. So I'm going to multiply by that 3 there. And then once I have that whole thing, I'm going to subtract 1. So subtract 1. I'm abbreviating a little bit there. Okay, so then I'm going to look at this function over here. If I had x here, the first thing I would do is add 1. So I'm going to add 1 here. My second step is I would divide 3. So divide by 3. And then my third step would be that I take the square root. Take square root. Okay, so I'm going to look at the opposite. So first and third. First and third is square it and take the square root opposites. Yes, they are. So I know that that one's good. Then I'm going to look, is multiply by 3 and divide by 3 opposites? Yeah, they are. So that one's good. And then subtracting 1 and adding 1, is that opposites? Yes, it is. So I would say these functions are inverses because they have opposite steps. So that's how we can tell if two functions are inverses. So that's how we tell between two of them. We also have this other idea, which is how to find inverses, right? So sometimes they might give us a problem like this one here, g of x equals 7x plus 18 over 2. And they want us to find the inverse of g of x. So they want us to find this section here. So that's what we're going to try. So I wrote down the steps over here. So first step is to write g of x as y. So instead of writing g of x, I'm going to write the letter y equals 7x plus 18 over 2. Okay, that's my first step. That's just making it like easier to do the problem. So I don't have g of x. So turning g of x into y. And then the second step is to switch x and y. That's because they're opposites of each other, right? So if I switch x and y, I'll have an opposite graph. So I'm going to switch my y into an x equals 7. The x is turning into a y plus 18 over 2. So I'm switching x and y here. My third step is to solve for y. So you might remember this from Miss Wall's class or from Miss Velasquez's class. I'm going to try to get y by itself. So in order to get y by itself, I see a fraction. I want to get rid of the fraction, so I'm going to multiply by 2. So I get 2x equals 7y plus 18. The 2 and multiply by 2 and divide by 2 cancel. I want to get y by itself, so I'm going to subtract 18 on both sides. I get 2x minus 18 equals 7y. I want to get y by itself, so I'm going to divide by 7 on both sides. And that's going to give me 2x minus 18 over 7 equals y. So I got y by itself, so I solved for y. And then the last piece is we're just going to change our y back to the fancy notation. And this time we're going to write it that this is the inverse. We're going to tell everybody. So g of -1 or g -1 of x is equal to, and I'm just going to put this on this side, 2x minus 18 over 7. And that is going to be our answer there. That's it, y'all. We're going to have a good time. Check out your notes for today. Check out your assignment for today. Thanks, y'all.